It's late. The house has that particular kind of silence that only comes after midnight. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of things resting. The refrigerator hums, the floor settles. Somewhere in the distance, a car passes and then disappears. I've always liked this hour. It feels honest. There's something I've been carrying for a long time, not because it was too big to say, but because it was too quiet, and I didn't trust myself to speak it without distorting it. You deserve the undistorted version. When we were together, I thought love had to compete with everything else in my life, with the noise, with the urgency, with the constant feeling that something important was always about to break, or launch, or collapse. I moved through days like they were puzzles to be solved, fires to be put out, problems waiting for precision. And you moved differently. You noticed small things. The way the light shifted across the kitchen table in the afternoon, the way I held my breath when I was thinking too hard, the way I said I'm fine when I clearly wasn't. You didn't confront me about it. You just stayed. At the time, I mistook that steadiness for something passive. I told myself you didn't need much, that you were independent, that you understood the pace I lived at. But the truth is, I never really asked. I assumed, and assumptions are quiet forms of distance. There's a particular evening I keep replaying. We were sitting on the floor, backs against the couch. No music, no television, just the soft yellow lamp in the corner and the sound of your fingers tapping lightly against your knee. You were telling me about something small, a conversation you had earlier that day. I nodded, but my mind was somewhere else, calculating timelines, anticipating tomorrow's decisions. You stopped mid-sentence. I didn't notice right away. When I looked at you, you weren't angry. You weren't even hurt in an obvious way. You just looked, alone. Even though I was right there. I've thought about that expression more than I've thought about most business failures, because it was preventable. Back then, I believed love was about endurance, about building something strong enough to withstand chaos. What I didn't understand was that love also requires presence, not intensity, not sacrifice, just presence. And presence is surprisingly difficult when your mind is always 10 steps ahead of your body. After we ended, I told myself it was inevitable, that two people with different rhythms can only synchronize for so long, that timing matters more than intention. That explanation was clean, rational. It made sense. But it wasn't complete. The incomplete part is this. I was afraid to slow down with you, not because I didn't care, because I cared enough to feel vulnerable in your stillness. When everything else in my life operates at scale, at speed, at consequence, stillness can feel dangerous. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you usually outrun. With you, there was nowhere to hide. You saw the exhaustion I disguised as ambition, the loneliness I reframed as independence, the fear I masked as focus, and you didn't try to fix it. You just made space for it. I didn't know what to do with that kind of acceptance, so I filled the space with work, with urgency, with reasons. It's strange how clarity only arrives after absence. I notice you now in the most ordinary moments. When I make coffee too strong because I'm distracted, you used to dilute it with hot water and slide the cup back toward me without saying a word. When I sit down at night and instinctively turn slightly, as if expecting someone to be there. When something genuinely good happens and for a fraction of a second my first impulse is to tell you, not because you were impressed by achievements, but because you understood the weight behind them. There's a difference. I've learned that love isn't proven in dramatic gestures. It's in the quiet adjustments. The way you shifted your schedule just to have dinner together, even if it was late. The way you listened to ideas that were half-formed and messy and treated them like they mattered. The way you reached for my hand in public, not to claim me, but to ground me. I used to think grounding was a limitation. Now I understand it was stability. I was afraid to tell you that sometimes, in the middle of crowded rooms and endless conversations, I felt profoundly small. Not inadequate, just human. You would have understood that. You understood most things before I explained them. But I rarely gave you the full explanation. I'm not saying I would change everything if I could go back. We were who we were. I was operating from the knowledge I had then. You were loving me with the patience you had then. We met each other as completely as we knew how. Still, there's one truth I've been afraid to say, even to myself. You weren't asking for more of me. You were asking for less armor, and I didn't know how to take it off. I confused vulnerability with instability. I thought if I allowed myself to soften, everything else might fracture. But that's not how it works. Softness isn't weakness. It's contact. Since you've been gone, I've practiced something I never prioritized before. Pausing. Not the strategic kind, not the calculated rest before another sprint. Just sitting, letting a thought finish without interrupting it, letting a feeling exist without categorizing it. It's uncomfortable sometimes. But it's also clarifying. I see now that love didn't fail because it wasn't strong enough. It changed because I hadn't grown into the version of myself who could receive it fully. That realization doesn't carry shame. It carries responsibility and gratitude. You loved me in a way that exposed my edges without trying to sand them down. You didn't demand transformation. You trusted it would happen naturally. Maybe this is part of that process, not reconciliation, not a request, just integration. I don't idealize what we had. We disagreed. We misunderstood each other. We had days where silence felt heavy instead of peaceful, but even those days were real, and real is rare. Sometimes I wonder if you sensed this shift in me before I did, if you stepped away not because you stopped loving me, but because you knew I needed to face myself without leaning on you. That thought doesn't hurt anymore. It feels generous. I don't know where you are tonight. Maybe you're asleep. Maybe you're reading. Maybe you're sitting in your own quiet room, noticing different small sounds. I hope someone is present with you in the ways I struggled to be. Not perfectly, just attentively. If there's anything I want you to know, without drama, without urgency, it's this. Loving you changed me in ways I didn't recognize until the noise settled. You taught me that intimacy isn't about intensity. It's about attention. And attention is a choice made over and over in ordinary moments. I'm learning that now, slowly. The room is quieter than it was an hour ago. Even the refrigerator has stopped humming. There's a softness to this kind of night, a permission to let things be unfinished. I don't need you to hear this. I just needed to finally say it, somewhere inside myself. And for the first time in a long while, that feels like enough.